Welcome back to a live edition of Pod by the Bay. I'm Seth Varnadore from Parts Unknown, joined by Anthony Vito and Robert Steeg. And gentlemen, since we last spoke, USF women's basketball team won a championship. Pretty good stuff. And as we're currently speaking, they are in the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about that in a segment. Let's talk about their tournament victory first. So, guys, thoughts on the AAC championship? Kind of wire to wire winning pretty much the whole time. It got a little dicey in a few spots, but never in doubt? Question mark.
I mean, theoretically, statistically, yes. They trailed 2-0 against Tulane in the opening game, which was promptly answered by a 3 that I think was by Vicky. And then USF never trailed after that moment until they won. So, all things considered, pretty good. They had probably what I would consider to be one of the tougher paths to get there. Defeating Tulane, who they were going to play for the first time. North Texas, who was the 2 seed and very, very good. And then you had to play Rice, who undefeated in Fort Worth over the last 2 seasons. You already beat Rice twice on the year, so beating a team a third time, and then just a scrappy team just in and of itself. So all things considered, a fantastic performance. The one of the grittier performances we've seen out of a USF women's basketball team when they absolutely needed it. Like, I mean, just really, really good stuff by Jose and the girls there.
Yeah, my kind of thought watching it, and this is kind of my most extended watch of this team. I've been following along, kind of just we got a little thunder here. I've been following along, but this is my first kind of really extended watch. And this is definitely not, I wouldn't say, like the most talented team he's had, probably not even recently. I think there's been a couple teams recently that have been better, but the team is really tough. They play hard, and they kind of gritted through, and they didn't really, they had a couple times where, a lesser team maybe kind of would have let some pressure get to them and fold a little bit. And every time somebody kind of counterpunched, they had a punch to go right back and never relented in these leads. So, Vito, what were your thoughts watching the tournament here this last weekend or this past week?
For a team, for a team that they dropped their last 2 games, we thought that injuries, they were getting exhausted. It was kind of a tough run, and we weren't really sure how they were going to do at the conference tournament. I was going to say shout out to Vanessa, who went to the conference tournament and covered the games pretty amazingly, made some really good videos, made some really good some good content, and got to see a championship happen. Like, that's got to be a really cool experience to watch that confetti go down. Steeg last year went to the men's tournament. Unfortunately, there was no confetti. So just shout out to her. Yeah. But the grit of the team, whenever they needed points, they seemed to be able to figure out how to do it. And they played some really darn good defense, especially down the stretch. And this is the starters played the majority of all 3 games. So by the end, that 4th quarter of the Rice game, we're like, Rice played another game. We were like, these teams are gassed. And then, like you mentioned, I think Victoria Blazek hit that 3 to kind of put that arm's length out and then kind of win it out. And Carla Brito was the most outstanding player for the tournament. Really great that they were able to just figure it out, because we knew this team was good. They beat Duke. They had probably one of the tougher non-conference slates definitely in the league and probably in the country. And they were able to put it together, so it's really good to get that trophy. They're great to watch. And what I did really like to see is it wasn't like early on when Sammy Puisis was lighting it up from beyond the arc. This was more of a team effort. There was a lot of different players that came alive. Mama had some really great moments. Laura had some great moments. Everybody kind of pulled together to make this happen. And I think it was a great coaching effort by Jose, and he clearly looked really, really happy with his speech watching this team come together and win. And he seems to really love them and love the people who came out to see it. So it was really nice to be able to kind of go into this Selection Sunday and not be like, oh, how are we going to get screwed or whatever. It's like, okay, we kind of shocked everybody a little bit here. Who do we get to go into and put put some fear in the eyes of the next team up? So I loved it. It was great. I love conference tournaments. Got basketball every day. It's such a different thing when you're used to playing 2 games a week. So yeah, that's I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, and I think if I told you beforehand, if I gave you Sammy Puise's stats and I said this is her stats for the conference tournament, these are her shooting percentages. How do you think this tournament's going to go? I don't think many would have said, "Oh, USF's going to win and lead basically the whole time," right? So I think that was good to see as well because there were times where it felt like Sammy was really driving things. But it's good to see them without Victoria Blasick played great, and she's sneaky been maybe even a better offensive player at times in Puises, which I talked about in the Ponderosa this past week, looking at some advanced stats. So it's good to see her come around and have a really good tournament. And then obviously Brito played really well. So Steve, there's anticipation. You win the championship, you know you're in. But now you get a chance to get announced where you are going. You went to the event tonight to see the selection show. Give us a little inside scoop there. How was the selection show event? Did you learn anything?
I learned nothing. I mean, I learned where USF was going to end up and everything like that. But no, I mean, the thing was, by all accounts, USF, everyone knew USF was either going to be like a 12, a 13, or maybe a 14 seed. There was really no doubts that they were going to get paired up in like kind of the south part of the bracket, right? When you look at how it's set up and, the ones at the top, we knew where they were going to be at. So every time in the first 2 regions that they got to the 12-5 game, the 13-4 game or anything like that, it was like you could feel the anticipation kind of mounting in the room a little bit, particularly when they got to, I think it was the Oxford regional when they announced Ole Miss. Everyone kind of expected USF to be called there, and they weren't, and so that was the first kind of go round. Jay, this jacket doesn't come off, by the way. But they
he sleeps in that jacket.
They got to the first one, and you could kind of you felt the anticipation mounting a little bit. No payoff. You got to the second regional bracket, the Birmingham 2 bracket, and again you got to I think it was Chapel Hill. I literally had the tweet pre-written that USF is the 13 seed taking on UNC Chapel Hill. No payoff there. And so when we got to the Texas side of the bracket in the South, I was like, all right, if they don't get it here, there's not probably that the anticipation was getting too plentiful for the room. So it was a great event though, for how quick they had to turn that around to, get everything kind of set up. There was a good contingent of people there too. Particularly my favorite part, totally unrelated to anything basketball related. Almost the entire time, about 30 minutes leading up to when the players actually went to go sit down on the court, they were up in the club taking pictures, doing autographs, talking with fans and everything like that. It was actually like a very sweet moment. And in years past covering this team, they're Division I athletes. They're also 18 to 22-year-old girls. They don't really love to interact with people, and there's all foreigners too, so they don't, English isn't their first language. This is the first time I've seen a USF team actually go out of their way to embrace the fans as a team. It was actually really nice to watch. Rami Levy was trading friendship bracelets with a young girl, or Mama Dembele was literally giving a high five to every single fan and everything like that. It was, that to me was my main takeaway. Was I was like, oh, this team's really really unified. It doesn't feel like it's a 1-woman show or a 2-woman show. There's a lot of love that these girls have for each other and for the fans. So it was really nice to see that.
Yeah, so that's cool.
Yeah, I was watching that.
Go ahead, Vito.
I love when we go live because we can't. There's no hey, let's edit that out. I always love seeing that because it's also got to be really intimidating to see all these people watching you and talking to you, and everybody wants to go and talk to you and say, "Hey, thanks for everything" or "Congrats," and it's really great to see. Hey, we're going to go out to the young girls out there because you don't know who's also into not even just basketball but team sports in general, and just getting that interaction can be so much more for those young women who get that high five or get that hug or friendship bracelet like you mentioned. So like that's kind of a neat moment in that. And I know it's tough for players again are just in college, but to be able to do that just adds so much and kind of helps to like that grassroots movement that Jose's built with his program, that you have these fans that are here that bring their kids and enjoy that success. But yeah, I mean, a 12 seed, like you mentioned, we all were kind of thinking Ole Miss, they're going to be that 13 seed, but being a 12 in Birmingham, USF and Birmingham, there's a match made in heaven right there.
Right.
Yeah, so you kind of get the announcement of the seed there. You're playing 12 seed playing Tennessee in Columbus, Ohio. So Ohio State's holding the region there. Yeah, it seemed what was interesting is kind of going through Thursday night. We did the Ponderosa and looked at kind of the bracketology up to that point. Obviously, not every conference tournament was finished, but a lot of people had USF going to play Oxford, but they also had USF as a 13 seed. One bracketology done the day before had this was obviously done a few days before. Had North Texas as the team they thought was going to win the AAC and had them as a 14 seed. So I think we saw kind of the stuff we talked about, why even kind of late into the season before kind of the end of the season skid there, that there was still a possibility, though unlikely, that USF could make an at-large bid because of that early season schedule they played that was so difficult. So I think that kind of bumped them up the seed line a little bit more than people previously thought, or maybe thought the AAC champion if it was UTSA or North Texas, because they did not kind of play that gauntlet that USF did out of conference. So were you guys surprised that they were on the 12 line, or was that kind of in the range if you guys thought?
Yeah, I mean, the quad one win against Duke, I think really helped USF, and then just good showings against teams like Vanderbilt. I think that pays a little bit of front of mind. The thing that USF has going for them, and at least as far as women's basketball goes, is that the committee tries to not take year over year things into play, obviously, but they also know Jose Fernandez's like resume and how they've been in the past. They've had great wins over the last like 4 or 5 years, and so I hate it because it happened on the men's side and it was disgusting. Having North Carolina in on the men's side of things was gross as hell. And not saying that USF is in a similar situation, but USF probably got a little bit of like a hat tip that we know you beat Duke. We know you played Louisville tough. We know that you've played these teams really well in the past. You gave South Carolina a scare like 2 years ago. So it's almost like, hey, this team can be dangerous. This team does have the ability to upset teams. It's not like Lehigh, who was a 15 seed, who had statistically a better year than USF, but doesn't have those quad one wins or those quad one opponents like USF did. So I think that's where like it was really, to me, it was no doubt between a 12 and a 13. I thought maybe if they got a little lucky, they might get an 11. But I didn't think that they would drop off. I think the committee probably knew based off of the craftsmanship of their work that like the losses that USF had this year weren't like debilitating losses or anything like that. To me, they were bad. I hated losing those last 2 games of the regular season, but at the end of the day, I think that Duke win probably really carried them a lot further than I think it really expected.
Yeah, that whole non-conference slate, and this is why you schedule the way you do here. You're going to take some losses early on because, like, they lost to 4 to Louisville. They looked really good against Mississippi State. and even though they weren't close, you still lose. You lose South Carolina, TCU, UConn. Those are still teams that are all in the top part of the bracket that you played against. So you have that up against you. And I think you're probably right, Seth, but there is a bit of, if it was UTSA, who, I mean, they only lost one conference game and then they lost their first game of the tournament. Freaking brutal, man. That maybe would drop down the seed list a little bit, but USF gets a little bit of that benefit of the doubt with that non-conference slate, even with just the one Q1 win. But again, that's a good win.
Yeah, I mean, we talked through that's one of the things we talked throughout the season. For most of the year until that very end of the year, kind of that little skid where, looking back, it may have been a point where Jose was just like, "Hey, I got to rest these girls before the tournament." So like, we've probably got to win the tournament to get in. So if we lose a couple of these, so what? I got to kind of let them get their legs back underneath them. Before that,
and just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback, just because South Carolina and Duke are 1 and 2 in the top part of the Birmingham region. So I mean, not bad.
Yeah. And you played South Carolina pretty tough for a lot of that game, and then obviously beat Duke, who's doing really well. But before that kind of late season skid, USF was the number one team in the net in the conference pretty much the whole year because they played that much harder schedule. There were times we were looking at, what are these other teams that are actually leading the conference? And it was like almost all their games were quad 4 games. And they had like 6 or 7 quad 2 and 3 combined, where USF was like 1 and 6 in quad 1 games. So I think the schedule definitely helped them, and it will prepare them. I don't think they're going to come into this game against Tennessee. So we'll start talking about Tennessee now. I don't think they're going to come into this game intimidated, right? The Duke team they beat is really good. They played UConn get the number 1 overall seed. South Carolina was right up. They played like a lot of really good teams this year. So this is not going to be the first elite team they've seen. Tennessee is an interesting team. Do you guys have any initial thoughts? I've kind of done some initial research, but what are your guys' thoughts on Tennessee? Looks like they're projected to beat USF by 13 initially. It's kind of the initial projection on Bart Torvik. So, hey, if you guys are getting ready for your bracket, BartTorvik.com is a really good spot. But, guys, initial thoughts on Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean, someone in our Discord put it probably best. There is no good matchup in the NCAA tournament. Like, you're not going to get an easy matchup. There's no easy out. The year that we thought we had an easy out, we got slammed by Buffalo. So keep that in mind.
12 seed Buffalo.
The bad news is that you are playing a team in Tennessee that is on the cusp of probably getting back into the greatness that was Tennessee Volunteers, Lady Volunteers basketball. They hired Kim Caldwell from Marshall. Kim Caldwell is like I can't use that word.
Counterpoint in the chat, Steeg.
They stink. Kim Caldwell is like that woman in collegiate women's basketball coaching right now. She took her alma mater, Glenville State, into like a powerhouse. And then in one season at Marshall, completely sparked that program. Just an unreal work ethic. If you haven't heard her story is absolutely wonderful. I think they did a 30 for 30 for her last year. But the bad news for USF is that you are playing probably one of the hottest teams that you could probably play going into the NCAA tournament. The good news is, though, they aren't the buzzsaw that they're going to be yet. They have some glaring weaknesses on their team. They have a lot of strengths. They're a lot bigger than USF. They're a lot deeper than USF. They have statistically basically like 2 full lineups that are going to put USF in hell. They have 10 girls that have played at least 30 games. And so and USF famously just played only 6 girls in the tournament because they don't have the depth quite like a team like Tennessee does. So for USF, this is not necessarily a matchup nightmare. Like, you actually kind of match up well against this Tennessee team, but the problem is that you're gonna have to go the full 40 minutes again and be on it from start to finish. There is no 4 minutes like scoring drought because their backups can come in and score just as efficiently as their starters.
Yeah, so they've got 10 girls that are average they're over 35%. They play at least 35% of the minutes. So like you said, they're it's not super top heavy. Now they do have some really good players. Looking on Bart Torvik, really good. The whole team's positive and plus minus. Like his box score plus minus. So this is a really good team. What's interesting? So before I get into some of the stats, so Vito, do you have any initial thoughts? Like, all I remember is when I was growing up. I think I'm a little bit older than you guys, but not much, not too much. When I was growing up, Tennessee women's basketball was like the it thing. Like Shamika Holtzclaw, Pat Summitt, that was kind of the crown jewel of women's basketball. So that's where my mind goes right away. Where does your mind go?
Oh, exactly. I was going to mention that just Tennessee has that brand recognition. Just growing up, it was always Pat Summitt's team, and Pat and like Gino Auriemma always had like some really great battles. That's a little bit older, and then Tennessee just always has that. Always had that prestige. So, and it's not like football where we say like you can't be scared of the the helmet on the other side of the field, but when you're in the NCAA tournament and you see these major brands coming, sometimes that can catch you by surprise. I don't think Jose is going to let that happen whatsoever. But what's interesting to me is Tennessee. They just started off the season and just swept their entire non-conference slate like nothing. So they started out 13-0, and that was including the first game of conference play, and then they went 500 in conference. They beat Texas A&M and then lost to Vanderbilt in the conference tournament. But if you look at it, they technically have lost 3 of their last 4. Not saying that means anything, but when you're USF and you went through and you won your last 3 games, that could be some momentum that you can say, hey, we figured it out. We know what we can do. We can do best. Let's go ahead and hit the film and try to figure out what we can do. I've noticed on ESPN, it says that they have their FBI, like what the percentage victory is. It says Tennessee has a 50 or 94% chance to win or something like that. And I went back. I was like, what was that Duke game? Okay, 94.2. The Duke game, Duke had a 95% chance of winning. And guess what happened? Just saying. Anything can happen if it goes the right way. Of course, when you're playing in a whole different state and a whole different stadium, and I mean, I don't even think they like without Cincinnati, you're not playing Ohio. I don't know. Sometimes the rims are different, so that would be the only thing there. But it's really just about can you keep playing your game and can you be successful? Because I don't even think they were playing 100% their game that they have been earlier in the year. So if you could somehow figure that out, you never know.
So just looking at so again, if you guys want to kind of have a lot of good info, we use KenPom a lot for the men's side, but there's also Bart Torvik who does some similar stuff. BartTorvik.com, BartTorvik.com. If you're getting ready for your March Madness, your brackets and things like that, it's a good resource. He's got some women's basketball stats as well, where I think KenPom only has the men. So looking through kind of Tennessee's numbers here, and we'll probably go really in depth on these later on this week in the Ponderosa, and maybe preview some possible second round matchups if possible. So ones that jump out. So like this, to me, the stylistic stats jump out. So they're 42nd in the country in 3-point rate. So the percentage of 3-point shots they take. And they are 4th in adjusted tempo. So it seems like just at that, and without having watched them before, if I'm just reading those stats, that would tell me they like to get up and down the floor, shoot a lot of threes. Now the interesting part, I would guess this is a like threes and shots at the rim type team. Probably not a lot of long twos would be my guess. I can kind of go look at their players and see how many 4-2s they've taken. Yeah, like they've taken 490 long twos, 823 shots at the basket, 957 3-pointers. So this is kind of like a totally opposite style to USF. USF is like 323rd in pace. They are one of the lowest teams in 3-point rate. But the interesting part is Tennessee is 118th in 3-point percentage. So I think USF is actually shoots a better percentage from three than Tennessee does. Tennessee just shoots a lot of them. USF is 72nd in 3-point
72nd.
Tennessee is, though, they're 51.8% on twos because they don't shoot a lot of long twos. You go look at USF, and I think I have them pulled up right now, or I can get them pulled up quickly. They shoot a lot of long twos. And Sammy Puises in particular shoots a lot of long twos, and those are not great shots in terms of efficiency. So, yes, USF has shot 717 what Bart Torvik calls far twos. Those are like mid-range shots. We said earlier Tennessee shot like 470 or 490. So Tennessee's like playing that super efficient kind of new wave basketball that everybody's playing, where shots at the rim and threes, don't shoot long twos unless they're wide open, and then not everybody can shoot them. So it's going to be an interesting style. I think it's going to be, it's cliche to say whose pace is the game being played at, but Tennessee does not get to the free throw line very much. They're 328th in the country in free throw rate, and they don't shoot free throws particularly well either. They're 263rd.
That was the one.
Percentage. Under 70% as a team from the free throw line. So it seems to me, looking through some of their games, just the numbers in their games, like they lost to Kentucky a couple weeks ago, scored 58, lost 82 to 58. Right. I think if they shoot, like if they just are off shooting, it's one of those teams that if they're not coming out firing, you might be able to give them some trouble. But they have some pretty good players. Talasia Cooper leads the team in usage, so she's got the ball in her hands a ton. She's also, I think, was a semifinalist for Defensive Player of the Year, the Naismith Defensive Award. And then they've got a couple. Jewel Spear seems to be the best shooter. She's shooting almost 39% from three and shoots 88% from the free throw line. The other good shooter is Samara Spencer, and she's also – so I think they've got pretty good guards in terms of scoring and defending ability. And that would make sense if your team likes to run and shoot. That's kind of where your talent would be. But I don't know. It'll be
if you look at
seem like totally opposite teams, really, in terms of their style of play.
If you look at the individual numbers too, each of their losses, it's wild because they're still hitting a lot of threes. But if all of their wins, they hit double-digit 3-point attempts or double-digit shots, makes rather. And every time they only hit 6, 6, 8, 6, 3, those are all losses. So, I mean, you're right, though, because they had a game where they went 30 for 63 from beyond the arc.
The North Carolina
won 139 to 50. Yeah, my goodness. Sorry, you get lost in some of these freaking advanced stats, but like you look at stuff like that and go like 30 of 63. Yeah. Like when you're shooting the ball, like even with no defenders, I mean, 30 for 63, nutso. But like, yeah, it seems like that could be. If they're not going to be hitting from beyond the arc and you can, hold back possessions, that's a way that you can win. If you can play a little defense or make them have to take free throws or give them tough shots under the basket, their free throw percentage isn't that great. USF's isn't that great either, but that's okay. And they're better than what Tennessee's is. Just kind of shocking to see that. But it seems like there's a way. This isn't just like a buzzsaw where like you play – NC State a few years ago or South Carolina or UConn, where it's just like, well, you just hope. I mean, this at least feels like there is a pathway.
Right. Yeah, there absolutely is a path here. Like it's really honest to God, not much more different than like the matchup against like UNT in the semifinals. Like UNT also a really deep team. UNT also really like team that relies very much on post play, And for USF, at least as far as how this matchup goes, it's kind of staying evergreen from the conference championship game. It's if you can stay out of foul trouble with Carla and Lore, then you might be able to have a shot here, because I think that Carla and Lore actually matches up pretty well in this situation, and they're more than willing to go the 40 minutes here. And I think the strength that Tennessee has in their depth could also become a detriment for them if they need to sub girls out, take out a hot hand for a break or something like that. Like, I can guarantee you that Carla and Lore are salivating at the idea of playing another a full 40 minutes against an SEC team like this. Like, this USF team is very hungry to do this very grindy thing. And thank goodness you have Diakite, who's coming in and providing some sort of relief in the post there. But like, if you can get a good Sammy Puisis game, you don't need a great Sammy Puisis game. You need a good Sammy Puisis game. Then I think USF has a really good shot here to pull off a good upset. Again, the problem is that if you put up a stinker from beyond 3, like, you're cooked. Like, this Tennessee team can probably very easily score 65 points against USF. And I think that's probably putting it kind of generously too. So you need that offensive output. You can't have a stinker offensively here.
No, I think this is a pretty good offensive team you're playing. I did want to say, like, you mentioned foul trouble. Really, like, you go look at, you mentioned go looking at North Texas in terms of just kind of the bodies they could throw at you. But North Texas really hunts fouls. I know that's something you said in your preview of that game. They were 23rd, I think, in free throw rate. Tennessee is like the opposite end of the spectrum. I think it's like drive to the basket and get layups or kick out for threes. And they just try to play fast is what it seems like. You want to say something, Vito?
Yeah, it looks like 13-ish point spread according to BartTorvik.com. It looks like it would be around 79-66. He doesn't know yet. 79-66, which if you look at USF defensively, they've only given up that many points, 3, 4, not going to count the 3 overtime game, 4 times. 1 against TCU. So it's like, defensively, they don't necessarily give up that many points, but point still stands. Especially a team like this can get under your skin too, because if you really start defending the perimeter and then all of a sudden they drive for layup, then you try to beef up the middle, then you start kicking for those threes. That's when those giant 8-0, 9-0, 10-0 runs can happen, and that's just really hard to fight against. But again, Jose, we trust. He's had these types of teams before, so I'm sure he knows how to defend against them. So it's just, creating frustration. And again, in a tournament setting like this, anything's possible because you're in a brand new arena that you haven't really been playing in traditionally. And yeah, I kind of just look at the last few games and go, hot hand versus a team hasn't been that hot. Granted, SEC is a little different conference, but yeah, you never know. It's still kind of there. It's just hoping all like the nagging injuries, everyone kind of gets a bit of a rest, gets to kind of reboot after a tough conference championship week, and then get ready for this travel.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is, like, you look at you talk kind of about the USF's defense has been pretty good. They have again on BartTorvik.com. We should get a cut for saying BartTorvik.com. But he's got kind of your numbers against like top 50 or higher quality teams. It's like a quality level. USF is 34th in defense against quality teams. Tennessee's like 45th or something. They're 11th in offense, and USF's 96th in offense. But the USF defense against quality teams is 34th. So, hopefully you can kind of hope that your defense leads the way. Tennessee also, just looking at them again, the other side, they don't get fouled very often, but they foul quite a bit. So this may be a game where you like slow it down and really work the ball inside get to the foul line, get some cheap ones, maybe get them and maybe get some of their guards into foul trouble that kind of run the show, and you kind of slow the game down and muck it up a little bit. But I think this might be one like a really high variance game where like it's very possible that Tennessee comes out and is hitting shots and they just blow you out of the water because you're a little bit limited offensively. Or it's possible that they come out and they don't hit shots and you frustrate them, you slow the game down, they start pressing, and then, you come out with a big upset. So I don't know. I think this is a game that kind of will widely has a large amount of variation. And I don't think it's quite the same in the women's game, but 12-5 is always a trendy upset pick in the men's bracket. So nice to see that.
This was I was gonna say, like, the way that you put that, if you were to put these two team profiles, when you're doing bracketology and like the men's side, that would definitely be an eyebrow raise of like,
Yeah, there's a wide variance possible here. It seems like, so I don't know how it'll shape up or break out, but I think we've done a pretty nice preview of Tennessee here. We'll be back probably later in the week, maybe go even more in depth into some of these numbers, go a little bit more in depth into the players on each side. I thought looking at the advanced stats for USF on Thursday for the Ponderosa was somewhat enlightening, especially with all the info at bartorvik.com. So we'll get more into that later this week in the Ponderosa. We'll maybe even look at who potentially could be a second round matchup. If you're interested in that, you can join us on our Patreon at patreon.com/Bay Area Examiner. We have a Discord section where Steeg is currently throwing out can we call it a hot board? Is it a warm board for USF men's basketball?
Call it a warm board.
Yeah, so it's we got a little Patreon section of the Discord for $5 a month. It's basically like most of the other message boards you get, but for half the price. And then for $10 a month, we get at least one extra podcast, typically every week. So usually about 4 a month, with a little bit advanced stats or go a little bit deeper into a topic during football season, film rooms, things like that. So that's $10 a month. You can join us there. We'll be here for a more in-depth preview later this week before the game. Fellas, any final thoughts as we dip into March Madness here? Are we allowed to say that without getting sued?
The big tournament trademark. Is there a big tournament? Oh, crap. What is the free trademark or the trademark free term we could use for this? No, I mean
basketball. Sorry.
Oh.
I think above all else is that it is a blessing that USF is back in the NCAA women's tournament. Missing it last year sucked big time. This is one of the most consistent programs in the country, from top to bottom. I'll say it, is the most consistent team that's not in a major conference. This team consistently battles it out every single year. I know they have to win their games in order to get into the tournament. They should be a lock in the tournament every single year with how that team schedules, with Jose's respect that he has towards women's basketball and what he's done for the sport itself. It's a shame that it's still in a question every single year, because if USF was in the ACC, they're a lock every single year, regardless of if they win that tournament or not. So the fact that we're back in the tournament, it feels good. It feels like Jose is starting to get a little bit more momentum back into the program. I think he's using the transfer portal beautifully. I think he's matching it equally as well on the recruiting rankings as well. So I'm happy that we're here. Whatever happens at this point is gravy. If we win by 20, if we lose by 40, it's all gravy in the boat at this point.
Well, I think there's only one more thing to say.
Oh no! Now we're definitely getting a copyright strike.
Basketball, gimme the ball because I'm gonna go get it. basketball. Give me the ball because I'm gonna dunk it!
All
I love
right. With that being said, we'll be back probably later this week with the Ponderosa. Thank you guys for watching a live episode of Pod of the Bay, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. You can use our code BAE for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com, or use our affiliate link that has been in previous descriptions. I don't know if it'll be in this one, but you can find that on X and other spots. So if it's first time home field, use our code BA15 for 15% off your first order. Thank you guys for checking us out live tonight. Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.